You're here for the Getting to Know Project 10's Family Guide to Secondary Transition Planning for Students with Disabilities. Our speakers today are Franklin and Lisa, and I'm going to let them give you a little bit about their background. If you have questions, please put them in the chat room. There'll be time at the end to go through those questions and answer them, okay? Franklin, I'll turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Pat. So yes, I am Franklin, and I'm with my wonderful colleague, Lisa Friedman Chavez, and both of us are regional transition representatives supporting two big regions in the state of Florida with Project 10, Transition Education Network. And what we're going to do today, we're going to piggyback. I'm going to go first, and then I'm going to hand over the baton to Lisa halfway through. Normally, this information we provide you could be an hour and a half, 2 hours long. It's a lot of information, but we're going to do our best to provide a succinct summary, and then the best tools that you can have are going to be uploaded in that EventMobi listing of documents, because we're going to have those for you. And of course, everything we talk about are going to be on Project 10's website. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and begin. And thank you again so much for joining us on this afternoon. I know sessions are sometimes pretty hard to stay focused, but we've had some really good sessions so far. Very inspiring. And hopefully you'll see. And let me know, Lisa, do you see just my slide, or do you see other things?
I see the upcoming slides too. It's not a slideshow yet, but there you go. Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. All right. So what we're going to talk about today is basically one of our popular products that we offer our families, and it's in that.
I think you did.
Yep, I see all these buttons is fantastic. So Getting to Know Project 10's Family Guide to Secondary Transition Planning for Students with Disabilities, one of our most popular products. It's a really comprehensive guide, and it really focuses on those topics that our families need to know for excellent transition planning from high school going into either deferment programs, post-high school work opportunities, employment opportunities, and just being career and life ready. So we're going to kind of have this overview. And let me go ahead and go to the next slide. All right. So we do have a couple of formal objectives, basically an outline, and then starting off with objectives, which I'll share with you in just a little bit. I'm going to quickly go over the website, wonderful, amazing Project 10 website, by the way. So if you've never, which would be like blasphemy, if you're attending this conference, been on our Project 10 website, you need to do that before the conference ends. But we have a lot of wealth of information. So you can find this product directly on our website, and I'll show you how. We're also going to cover the major highlights of our topics from the Family Guide. So again, everything A to Z for secondary transition planning. So it can be overwhelming going each topic in depth, but this guide does a really good job at kind of just enough about what you need to know to then dive deep. We're going to go over those major headings, highlight a couple things, and at the end, we're going to do a review of some additional tools and what our appendices does to support this guide. Okay, excellent. All right, so a couple of objectives, just because that's how we roll with Project 10, is we kind of formalize what we want you to learn by the time we're done presenting information, and that is this. We want you to be able to locate where the the Family Guide to Secondary Transition Planning for Students with Disabilities is located. You're also going to identify where the toolkit, or what we call the Padlet, is on our website as well. They work hand in hand as companion documents, if you will, live navigable tools to use in that planning. We also want you to describe the content, the major content areas of the Family Guide, and then how to use the tools and the appendix to supplement and support all of that planning along that way from 9th grade and beyond. Okay, on our website, there's a couple of routes that you can take. As with anything in life, there are multiple routes to get to a destination. So on our website, there are a couple of routes. I'm going to show you a couple on how to get specifically to this document, the Family Guide to Secondary Transition. So if you go to our major main website, you can Google Project 10, that'll suffice. It's the first thing that shows up. You can enter it right into your navigational bar, the toolbar, www.project10.info or just project10.info. It'll bring you there. There are major topic headings. So if you just hover over the student engagement topic heading at the top of the page, and also there are buckets. You can kind of see, if you look hard enough on the slide, you can kind of see that there are 8 major topics with kind of gray, green, and blue color coding. If you hover over family involvement topic, then up will pop up a guide that will, and then you click on family involvement, you'll then see that PDF document and file section called Family Guide to Secondary Transition Planning for Students with Disabilities. That's a primary way on how to get this resource, okay? But in addition, there is a way to get the Padlet and also that same family guide that I just mentioned, and that is through this way. And this is actually my favorite way to get a lot of things, and this is the one I recommend my stakeholders in my districts to easily get there, and that is the publications tab. So anything that we produce in Project 10, if it's digestible and nutritious for you, which is what we provide at Project 10, we're going to often store it underneath the publications tab under our website heading, publications. So just go back to that main site. Again, scroll to one of those 8 big, large bucket areas called training and publications. Once you click there, it's going to give you all of the items under publications that we produce that you hear are like, oh my gosh, did you get your hands on that? That new secondary roadmap? That's where you find it. That trail map, that's where you find it. A cheat sheet or list, that's where you're going to probably find it. So you're going to find those things, the Padlet and that family guide that I just showed with you on the last slide, you'll find it under publications as well. So those are some useful hints. And of course, when in doubt, if you're lost and confused, you can always contact your regional transition representative and we will help guide you right to where you need to go on our website. All right. So at the way that the guide is kind of divided up and how it's kind of presented as a template, you'll notice there's a common theme as you go throughout this manual, and that is we have major sections, major components, and then each component on this PowerPoint, you're going to see that we often associate a major component with an additional handy tool located in the back called the appendix. And there's lots of tools and guides and supports in the back. It's almost half the guide, actually. The one half is the actual content. The other half is lots of resources to use that are really nifty. What we've done is on this slideshow is provide you with a direct connection between what tool matches what content as we present. So if you see a starburst that's yellow and it has appendix and it has letters, just know that that means that it coordinates with a tool in the very back of the guide, or the second half of the guide, if you will, that family guide. The first major heading is this. It's transition legislation and purpose. We like to start off anything with transition recommendations or tools with the underpinnings about why it's important to do what we do. And of course, it all begins with the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, and the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA. The reason why these are really powerful and important because it not only promotes how we run things when it comes to supporting students in education that have disabilities and their rights and then the formal process that support them, but it also, specifically with WIOA, it gives students with disabilities the ability to actually get trained, get work ready, and be employed and have careers. So they really do go hand in hand, and they're the underpinnings of all of the resources and support that are mandated or best practices in those areas. There is a sub-bullet there you see, pre-employment transition services. So the guide is going to be able to help families go through and understand a little bit better what pre-ETS, what we call pre-ETS is, because as we all know, as stakeholders, educators, professionals, agencies, we know that pre-ETS is especially it has a lot of weight coming behind legislatively in the state of Florida and nationally, but it allows opportunities for students as young as 14 with disabilities, 504 plans, or otherwise diagnosed or have an identified disability to get connected to vocational rehabilitation and get more work ready, even basically starting by the middle school level. So that is why that's an underpinning to that WIOA, because those actually go hand in hand specifically about how we students with disabilities and families and what they need to know. The bottom part of this slide, I love this. This is kind of like a soapbox. Like if I had 5 soapboxes, this is one of them. And I just wanted to share that process works with secondary transition planning is different than how we kind of operate with an IEP and IEP meetings at the elementary level. We really start with the idea, and we kind of alert parents and families to do this. Think about the future. Think about post-secondary opportunities and goals in life, that blueprint, and what data we have right now to be able to best assess what are those obtainable goals. What are those future plans that are reasonable, ambitious, and doable, and provides quality of life and independence and employment. That's where that where am I now and where do I want to go? Those are the 2 arrows. The third arrow is how do you get there? So those are the annual goals and the services, accommodations, supports, and the day-to-day functioning of what education looks like for that student and that family for that year. But notice that comes third after the arrow 1 and arrow 2. I love this slide, and I just wanted to emphasize this, that we also convey that to our families. All right, so for the transition components of the IEP, the next section, we really look at the topical area, the areas that kind of play out in the guide. And so notice these are all really high quality elements of topics. Notice of the meeting, participants, measurable post-secondary goals, transition services, etc. All of these are going to be critical because each one of them presents a level of topic or understanding about what families need to know about their legal rights, about how they can participate equally as a partner in the decision with their student, and then also just understanding processes that sometimes, you know, at the school district, we're always inviting them, giving them notices, making decisions. And it just seems like parents and families and students are bystanders. And this guide, as you can see with the topics covered, is going to help introduce them so they can be better understanders and participants in that same process. So it's not the school process, it's about the student. And by the way, families, you're an integral part of that. This next slide just highlights the differences in the IEP with transition components compared to maybe the components that we're used to at the elementary age level. So this slide and the next slide in that toolkit will actually be a nice little summary about, wait a minute, what is different about when my kid turns 14 or when my kid turns 16? Why is it that we do X, Y, and Z and not A, B, and C anymore? That's interesting. Why is it that it's really important for me to be engaged as a family at 16, just like I was the first time they were eligible at age 5, right? Because different topics about the future start coming up and in fact are required by law for the school district to present and that IEP team to discuss and review. For example, having that student be a participant on the invite and making sure that they have advocacy, self-advocacy, and self-determination skills to be able to showcase themselves and meet their and address their needs that they have every day. So that is an example of the law says, oh, we have to talk about that by age 14, or like that pre-eds conversation I just talked with you briefly about, that topic of pre-eds. Oh, by the way, for our schools, they need to make sure that they address that topic no later than the time a student turns 16. So we think parents and families should know that as well. So it kind of highlights the difference about how that operation and those topics of IEPs at the secondary transition level are different than what they're used to. And of course, the next slide kind of piggybacks on that, and that is this. We have a really cool document that Project 10 kind of created or brought together some information and provided it all in one nice, easy resource, and that is called the Transition Services Checklist. Not only did we embed it in the family guide, so you'll get it there, but remember that awesome website I told you about, Project 10? If you go there and go to publications, you're also going to find it as a standalone document underneath publications. It's called the Transition Services Checklist. And what's magical about this is we take all the required mandates, laws, IDEA, and state statute elements and put them in an age kind of category checklist from 14 through 21. So that way you as a family, you as a student, and you as an educator or stakeholder will be able to know exactly what year has what kind of element needing to be addressed. So it's a really good cheat sheet and planning sheet for everyone involved. And then for responsibilities and linkages. So as you can see too, and I forgot to address this earlier, but you also see besides those yellow starburst appendix A, B, C, D, whatever letters, we also included in another little color box, the Family Guide page numbers that are associated with the topic that we're covering. So I probably should have said that from the beginning, but you probably have figured that out, right? Of course. So if you're on this page, our responsibilities and linkages would coordinate to pages 19 and 20 in the Family Guide. And what we want to mention here is we can't emphasize enough that having the appropriate agency linkages and stakeholder commitments and involvement are so critical for students in their future. So in other words, popular agencies, entities, and supports like vocational rehabilitation, the Agency for Persons with Disabilities, the Center for Autism-Related Disabilities, college representatives and mentors and counselors that might be involved with that student, any and all the above plus more. It is so critical for those folks to be part of that student's transition planning as soon as they become aware or eligible or becoming eligible for any of those services. So for example, APD might be something that we have to, as a family, recognize early on in the journey, whereas vocational rehabilitation might be something we recognize and connect with when they're in middle school or at age 13 going into 14, et cetera. So there is always an appropriate time and place for a lot of these folks to be involved, but the bottom line, they need to be involved because when the student graduates and leaves IDEA and K-12 and by favorite teacher of algebra, by history teacher, guess who's going to be at the end of that road? It's going to be the community, your family, that self-advocacy, self-determination, and the world of eligibility. And you'd like to have some partners along the way, especially for some of our students that have unique needs. So we have a section in our Family Guide that addresses that. That being said, I think my portion, I'm going to hand over to my wonderful colleague, Lisa. So let me stop sharing, Lisa, and then you're going to pick up. And you're on mute.
Yeah, so I said all these wonderful things. Anyway, I was expressing, you know, I enjoyed how you actually had the students as they transition from high school and their favorite teachers. What I also wanted to mention before we forget too is that, well, two things. One, I wanted to thank everyone who has introduced themselves in the chat box. And if you haven't already, please do so. That's kind of our sign-in sheet. So that helps us as a grant. And also I wanted to make mention, Franklin had alluded to this, this is an abbreviated presentation. So we are more than happy, any of your Project 10 regional transition representatives, we have our final slide, all of our contact information is there. You can reach out to us and we can do the full length version of this. So you really are getting the super quick, super speedy, 75 miles an hour, plus you don't have all of the slides. So this is definitely something that is available to, you know, present. You just reach out to us even after visions. All right, so going to be moving on. The next section we wanted to cover. So you can see Family Guide pages 20 through 22. There is a section on self-determination and self-advocacy, and Appendix O is a self-determination parent checklist, which is a 2-page self-determination checklist, and that was developed by I'm Determined. And one of the things that we did want to point out regarding self-determination just in general, and there's another slide coming up that will kind of go into the legislation regarding self-determination and self-advocacy. But sometimes people are thinking that self-determination and self-advocacy can be used interchangeably, and they're not. As you can see on the slide, self-advocacy is one of the core components of self-determination, and there are multiple core components. And so when Franklin was talking about transition assessment, information, you need to be looking at all of these different areas. It's not just self-advocacy, although that is a critical area of self-determination, but there are so many other elements that you need to be checking out. So I want to make sure you have that. And your regional transition reps also have the definition of each one of those. It's in a one-page handout from I'm Determined. So this is the Florida statute that we were referencing. Let me move over so I can see my screen a little bit better. So you can see for Florida statute, this is required by age 14. So you're looking at this when the student is age 13. IEP teams need to consider the student's need for instruction in the area of self-determination and self-advocacy. And the purpose of that is to assist the student's active and effective participation in an IEP meeting. And this is a little plug also, we do have the Standing Up For Me self-determination curriculum, and that's something that is available. We train on it. The updated high school portion is available if you folks are interested, but that also helps with this particular law and really, providing curriculum to help students participate as actively as they possibly can. But the goal is that they'll participate in their own IEP meeting to the greatest extent possible, even if they are, if they're not able to communicate verbally. They might be using their augmentative communication device to introduce folks. There could be a lot of pre-planning where maybe they're making a collage that we'll talk about that will express their post-secondary goals, or even recording something ahead of time if that works, better for them. They feel more comfortable with that option, but the greatest extent possible, and also to prepare students for choosing their post-secondary goals and career goals, which have to be in the IEP by age 16. On pages 22 through 23, you're going to find this wonderful table. It is Appendix M, which is the student, family, and agency responsibilities. Well, you're not going to find the table. The table is actually in the appendix. You're going to find information about IEP teamwork. I'm sorry, I'm going backtrack a little bit. But it's important because it's a team. It's a true team, and each member of the team does have responsibilities. So we want to make sure that everybody understands what is expected of them, including students. They do have responsibilities as well. Another great resource, so you have the family guide. We also uploaded inside Event Mobi. You can also access the secondary transition roadmap for families. And I put in the chat box a link to our publications webpage, and all of the publications that we're referencing, you can find over there. But in the beginning of the secondary transition roadmap, you can also find information regarding the different responsibilities of the IEP team members. So lots of great resources, but it's really important for folks to understand those expectations. And family involvement, so important, so important. So there is a section within the family guide, and the family guide was designed specifically for families in mind, but we created this presentation. It was, still is geared towards families, but a lot of folks are benefiting from the family guide to secondary transition planning for students with disabilities because it's great information. And so we like to always remind everyone, we want families to understand how important they are, and also remind everyone who is working with families to help, encourage their participation, because, they have this valuable information that the school system might not be able to access. If you're only seeing a student during the school hours, what's going on with that student in the evening, on the weekends? They might have a very different level of communication when they're with their entire family, at a big family gathering. Not in the COVID times, right? But it could be very different. They also might have lots of skill sets that maybe the school's not aware of. They might be an avid fisherman, or they could be making, these really awesome beaded projects or art, which involves these really intense fine motor skills, and maybe even selling it. That's in business skills. So families have so much impact, so much important information. They're a huge, part of the process. So we just include a little bit of research regarding their impact, and just a reminder for anyone working with families to really try to include them as much as possible in the process. And for families, sometimes they get discouraged, or they might think that, oh, well, they know what they're doing. I just let the school district decide. No, we want their participation. So some things that help with student and family involvement, you can find Appendix C, which is a directory of Florida Parent Centers. We also have a slide in our presentation for that. Appendix F, there's a local contact list that allows families to indicate for representatives from school, the community, and it would be them filling out the position, their name, telephone, email. So it's an actual contact list for them specific. Appendix H is the parent's record of the IEP meeting, and Appendix I is a contact log. So it provides a structure for families to keep track of everyone, all of the different communications that they have had. So just lots of different resources. Some supportive strategies for families to consider, and that maintaining high expectations, yes, that's good for families. That's really important for everybody, including the student. Helping the youth to understand the impact of their disability. And also that goes into kind of that self-awareness as well. We have some students graduating high school and they still don't know that they have a disability, which creates some issues if they are planning to disclose, or they would have trouble disclosing, let me put it that way, if they're going on to higher education or for the purpose of employment and getting accommodations. Definitely remaining actively involved in transition planning, throughout the entire process. With helping youth access information and services, really have them be involved in the process. So if it's, Medicaid waiver, have them be involved. That's part of self-determination also, making sure they know how to get in touch with their different service providers and how to access additional resources, including vocational rehabilitation, Center for Independent Living, things like that. Learning about rights and responsibilities. Also, slide coming up, but enlisting support from parent training and information centers. We love our acronyms. That would be the PTICs through Family Network on Disabilities, and also your community parent resource centers, CPRCs. There are 2 of those in the state. We're going to show you momentarily. All righty. So Appendix C is your directory of Florida Parent Centers. Back in October, Family Network on Disabilities did have a massive restructuring for their parent training and information centers. So the map on the slide is correct, and the Appendix C has been updated. So those are the accurate counties that each of the parent training and information centers under FND cover, and that's the contact information. And we also have 2 community parent resource centers. You can see them on the bottom of your Appendix C, but Empowerment Parent Resource Center of Northwest Florida, Inc., that's in the Panhandle, and Parent to Parent of Miami. They are working with Miami-Dade and Monroe counties. Appendix, let me back up. Getting a head start on transition. There is a section that talks about what can you do to, help kind of do a really wonderful kickstart, a boost for secondary transition. The earlier you can start, the better. So that particular section will give some examples of what you can be doing, even starting in elementary school. So elementary school, middle school, we have a slide coming up that will talk about our middle school transition resources. They're amazing. And we also have a training of, some of you were on our previous training, I believe, right before this one. But yeah, lots of wonderful things regarding middle school transition because it is so important. There's so much to be working on at that age. And Appendix O and Appendix P would be helpful in getting a head start. O, again, is that self-determination parent checklist. And for P, it's a youth employment skills parent checklist because there are things that parents can be doing related to employment, career awareness, career exploration that you can start very early on. And that includes exploring, interest areas. As promised, these are some screenshots of our middle school transition resources, also available under our publications webpage, the middle school transition trail map for families, that's available in Spanish as well. The benchmarks for middle grades transition planning, also available in Spanish. And the middle school transition trail map for families does have a corresponding document, which has the references and resources for that. And there is a training that we can provide for families, for staff, regarding middle school transition. And that goes into the transition from elementary into middle, while they're in middle school, things that they can be doing to prepare for that transition from middle to high school. So really valuable information. And this is another one where I'm looking at the time, I'm being cognizant, but there's so much information here to share with you all. I don't have time to go into all of them. When we have the longer presentation, we do go into these in much further detail, but a lot of families have many, many questions about graduation and post-school options. So within the guidebook, the bullet points that you see there, each one of those is discussed in greater detail within the family guide, including the diploma options. All of them are laid out, the diploma designations, merit, scholar, what the requirements are, also additional resources where you can get further information. Deferring receipt of the standard diploma, we get questions about that on a regular basis. The section within the family guide is good. The updated secondary transition roadmap, I think, is amazing for deferral. So you already have the link to that. You also have it in your VentMobi. Highly suggest checking it out. Really, really, really good information there. With extended transition programs, you also have, well, the deferral, free appropriate public education, more commonly known as FAPE, extended transition programs, they all kind of go together. And we also have extended transition programs listed on our website. There's a section we update it once a year. And post-school options, some information is included in the family guide. You can also always look on our website, and you can reach out to us to talk more about what post-school options are available, in your area throughout the state. And then there's a section for differences between IDEA and ADA. And we do have a screenshot of that table in the book. And when I've shown this to folks, like, this is awesome, because it's a really good description. A lot of times when students are going on to college, a common misperception that families may have is that the college is going to take the IEP and they're going to provide all those accommodations, and that's not the way it works. But there are other things that need to be taken into consideration. So this particular chart, I think, is fabulous to really show those differences in accessing services. And I think it's also a great reminder, if you are planning to disclose and, access services from the Disability Resource Center, that it needs to start early. You wouldn't want to do it like a week before classes are going to start, because it's not enough time for them to get everything in place. But this is a very helpful chart. So that would be in the family guide on page 39. So I want to make sure you're all aware that that exists. And getting close to the end of the family guide, before you hit the different appendices, you have a section for planning for adult living. So you can find information about age and majority and guardianship. I was in the session that was held 1:30 today with FND. They did a presentation on age and majority and guardianship. It was fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. So highly recommend checking that out. We also have the State Secondary Transition Interagency Committee is working on a document, and hopefully will be out over the summer, I'll say, by the beginning of next year, regarding age and majority, transfer of rights, guardianship, other decision-making alternatives. So that will be forthcoming, but do recommend the FND presentation. I learned a lot of information from that. Finances, Medicaid waiver is on there. One thing I did want to plug in, and Franklin already mentioned this too, but if students do, have a Medicaid waiver support coordinator, that's wonderful. They are so fortunate, but please make sure that that support coordinator is actively involved in the transition planning process as well, because when they are leaving the school system into the adult world, that support coordinator is the one who knows what supports and services they can get approved for their cost plan. So really, trying to, have that agency linkage, early on. Social Security Administration, just be aware that they do have programs and provisions. They have different work incentives. There's the Work Incentives Planning and Assistance Program. You can find more information in the book. Even vocational rehabilitation, if they are a traditional VR client, they can get benefits planning assistance. So there's definitely free benefits planning in the state. And, we know some families, some students are very hesitant to work because they're afraid of losing benefits. So it's important. We don't have to be experts in benefits planning, but at least know enough to share the information for families to follow up. ABLE accounts, we had that great presentation if you're part of the transition context meeting, and I hope that was recorded and available for everyone, because so much great information was shared. I learned more stuff than that too, but the book has some information. Independent living, information about housing, transportation. We also have information on housing and transportation on our website that you can check out, including different resources related to both of those. And one thing I did want to mention with transportation, so important because for some of our students, and I've heard stories which really break your heart, where students were not able to access a job that they, were accepted to have, or a scholarship, or, different kinds of opportunities because it's something related to transportation, some transportation challenge. So when you're looking at things related to transition, making sure that transportation is something that is looked at as well. And I know that, the district that I work with, I think are doing a fabulous job with looking in that as part of the transition planning process. So important when that moving into adulthood. But with that, and Franklin, if I missed something, you let me know. But I know we want to leave time at the end for questions from you all, questions and comments. Oh, we also have an online evaluation form. And let me open up my chat box, sorry.
Yeah, Lisa, you did great. And I can't think of anything, but maybe we'll have some questions. But I did just post in the chat box the 2-minute survey. If you were to be able to complete that little mini evaluation, if you would, before you exit this Zoom room, that would be fantastic. And Lisa and I really appreciate it. And it allows us to get feedback and how we present and do different topics and trainings in the future. So thank you.
Yeah, and this is our contact information. You're more than welcome to reach out to us. And in the next slide, you're going to see the regions that Franklin and I cover. And you're also going to see who the other regional transition representatives are in the state. And we also have 2 statewide representatives. You can see Carla Green oversees juvenile justice with the DOE, and also Joey Nice works with alternative education. They're both statewide positions.
I don't see any questions in the chat box. A lot of thank yous, which is great.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All
yeah,
the
there are
resources.
so many resources. Yeah. There. And honest, that's something, I mean, the publications webpage, but there's so much more on our website. And if you ever want, Project 10 RTRs can even schedule like a Zoom session just to give you a tour of the website and where some of the things are and other additional resources. Lots and lots and lots.
If there's no questions, I just want to remind everybody about tomorrow. Our first session starts at 8:30. We have 2 concurrent sessions, one starting at 8:30, the other one at 9:30. And then the final session is 10:30 with the closing. All right, let me talk again. Closing keynote with Florida Department of Education Bureau of Exceptional Student Education speaker. It's late in the afternoon, been talking too much today. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. If not, we'll see you all tomorrow. Don't forget the DCDT membership meeting tomorrow. We'd like to see many of you there to see about what DCDT can do for you. All of these sessions are being recorded and will be posted on the Florida DCDT website, which is floridadcdt.org. All right. Any other things we need to ask and mention? All right. Thank you very much all for coming. Franklin, I think we can end the meeting.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, as always, Lisa. And thank you, everyone, for participating. And have a great afternoon, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.